Hello, I'm Sarah Manasreh.
And I'm Berginald Rash, and this is Clarinet and Community.
A video series dedicated to clarinet, community, and belonging.
Welcome. Bienvenidos.
Hello, I'm Berginald Rash with Clarinet and Community, and today Sarah and I are so excited to introduce you to one of our faves, Heather Roche, an amazing and celebrated contemporary clarinetist based in London, professor at Goldsmiths University, and new music champion, where she discusses her amazing resources in contemporary clarinet performance and extended techniques. We hope you enjoy as much as we did. We are here today with the amazing, the incomparable Heather Roche. I love her. I love what she's doing. And I love the work that she is putting in to really sort of create more spaces for clarinetists to discover and develop community in contemporary music. And I'll let her talk about that more. But Heather, if you could, thank you for joining Sarah and I. If you could just tell us, like, how tell us about yourself. How did you get to where you are? What led you to the path you're on? Tell us some things that came together to make up the person you are and the career that you have today.
Hi, well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. So I a lot of what made me the player that I am now came from my interest in contemporary music. And that really started when I was a student at the University of Victoria in Canada, where I grew up. And all of my friends were composers, and studying in a place that's a little bit far away from just about everything, we didn't have visiting ensembles. Like a lot of the places where I live, a lot of the institutions where I live now in Europe, you have visiting ensembles to come play composers' works. That makes up a lot of the work that I do. But in Victoria, we didn't have those. So the composers were very much reliant on making friends with players, which I actually think is probably, in the long run, a pretty good way to go about it. Helps keep them out of their little boxes. So all of my friends were composers, and I loved playing new music. I also loved playing in the orchestra. So when I came to London to study, I was doing an orchestra training course. But one of the things that I noticed is I really loved playing chamber music. And one of the things I really liked about it is that I got to choose my colleagues, which obviously, if you get a job in an orchestra, that's not necessarily what's going to happen. So chamber music and new music became the focus, and then it just became a matter of sort of how do I make that my living. So most of my kind of chamber music mainstays these days are either I've got a duo with an accordion player called Eva Zollner, and she lives in Germany, and we do loads of stuff together. And then I also play with a group in London called Apartment House, which has been around for 20 years or so, and I've been with them for 5 now. And then other than that, I'm kind of freelancing. And I have a few other side hustles. So I'm also the reviews editor for a journal, an academic journal in contemporary music. And so I do all the commissioning and editing of reviews for them, and a little bit of writing here and there, sometimes for the Clarinet and Saxophone Society of Great Britain, and a little bit of teaching. And that's sort of, professionally, that's sort of where I'm at, I think, these days.
That's wonderful. I love the so many different facets to your career. All seem to be kind of pushing towards contemporary music. And one thing that I noticed about all of your social media, your webpage, that kind of thing, is it's very resource based. Can you tell us a little bit about how you utilize internet platforms, and what are some of the things you've created through these internet platforms?
Sure, yeah. So I think it all came out of the resources that I've been collecting on my website. That's definitely what started it. So I did a PhD at the University of Huddersfield in the north of England, and as I was finishing that, I was also in the process of moving to Germany, and there was a kind of transitionary phase in life where I didn't have a lot of work. I was just finishing my PhD, and my research brain was still kind of going, and I was looking for ways to sort of indulge it. And what started to happen as I was doing more contemporary music is composers would write me emails. Composers I didn't know quite often would write me emails and say, how do you do this and this and this? How do I write this? How do I, what can the clarinet do with this technique? And I noticed that I was responding to the emails with the same answers a lot. So at one point, someone sent me an email asking me about, air sounds on the clarinet. So we can have these beautiful pitched air sounds that can be sort of unpitched without any clarinet sound, or you can introduce them. You can kind of like create all of these different colors that composers love to use in contemporary music. And I thought, I'm tired of answering the same question over and over again. Do you know what? I'm just going to write something down about it. I'll put it on my website. I'll record a few examples, and then I'll leave it there. And then the next time someone asks me this question, I can just send them to my website. What I didn't expect is for it to go mental on the internet. And so I thought, oh, maybe I'm onto something. So I just waited for the next composer to ask me a question, which I think had something to do with articulation, so slap tongue or flutter tongue or something like this. And so there I went and wrote the next thing and put that up there. And then it just sort of kind of grew into this resource, which is mostly aimed at composers, but I have heard from a number of clarinet players that it is useful in some ways, and we can sort of talk about the ways that it might be useful for your viewers later, maybe. And I guess in terms of the social media side of things, that's just always been the best way, the most efficient way to kind of share those things. And I think it's very difficult for us as players to have kind of an effective social media presence. But I have found that because I'm sharing resources that are unique, that don't necessarily exist anywhere else on the internet, that actually has made my social media presence. So I'm not just sharing, oh, I'm playing here tomorrow. It's really kind of, here's something that you can use that's useful for you. And I think that made a big difference. And that also created a kind of strange niche for me. And I mean, it's just sort of fascinating. Like, Eva Zona and I were on tour in Colombia in September, and we were doing a project with 6 youngish composers from Bogota. And it was amazing. I mean, it was almost embarrassing. Some of them, I think, knew the resources on my website better than I did. Because one of them had written something, and I don't think this works. And he immediately like opened it up and he was like, here's a recording of you doing exactly what you just said doesn't work. Oh. Oops. I suppose that was always going to happen. But yeah, I think the social media thing, the use of social media and YouTube is definitely linked to the blog. So some of the things that you'll see on YouTube where I'm explaining things are linked to on specific blog posts and things like this.
So I want to follow up just a little bit about, during the pandemic, I started a lot of projects to kind of fill the time that is now spent traveling between places and gigging and the busyness of the in-person life. What were some? Did you come up with any projects that you had during the pandemic, and how are you transitioning them as the world begins to become more in person?
Yeah, good question. I think one of the things that's had the most, I think with a lot of us, we've done a lot of teaching, and one of the nice things about the pandemic was there were a lot of places. There were quite a few conservatoires in the States, for example, that had always been talking about having me in to work with their composers, but they basically just couldn't afford the airfare. And we were always trying to kind of line it up so that I could do a sort of tour, and it just sort of never worked out. But I finally got to kind of work in those places because suddenly it didn't matter, which often meant teaching master classes for composers at like midnight here. But yeah. I think one of the newer things is as soon as lockdown happened here, I bought a nicer set of microphones, and I started doing a lot of film recording work. And that's crossed over very nicely into normal life. And having sort of set up a good studio space at home that I really feel comfortable with, and I really feel like I know how to use the technology, and I know how to get a good sound. And I've had enough kind of positive experiences that that's sort of a nice, I've got to stop using the term side hustle, but it's a side hustle. And then, I mean, I think the hardest thing is because my duo project with Ava, because she lives in Germany, we didn't see each other for a year and a half. So we were trying to follow through on a few pandemic projects I'm very happy to say goodbye to the pandemic for that, because that was a lot of recording stuff to a click track or a stopwatch or something like this, and then trying to mash things together and just crossing your fingers about things like intonation and such. No, thank you. Rather pleasingly, one of my teaching projects was with the third year composition students at the Guildhall of School of Music, which is only a half an hour from me here. And that's turned into a regular once a year project. And I don't know if it's the same for other players who are doing this kind of thing, but so often I get brought in by a university or a conservatoire and do a project with their composers, and then I'm sort of out again, and then maybe they'll have me back a couple of years later. But the Guildhall have been really generous, and now every year it's a fourth year, composers have to write a piece for clarinet and electronics, and it's like one of my favorite projects of the year.
That's brilliant. It sounds like your journey into contemporary music has not only expanded repertoire, but has also expanded your network and your community. And along the way, you've been able to discover a lot of new communities, maybe create community. And I'm really interested to know, as our title is Clarinet and Community, what are some of the communities you've discovered, maybe you fostered, you've helped nurture, or that you're a part of through contemporary music, through your research and through your pedagogical output?
That's a really good, complex question. I guess in terms of, well, as I was saying before, when I was a student, all of my friends were composers, and that's sort of how I got into new music in the first place. And I think continuing to nurture the next generation of composers is really, really important to me, probably more important than most things. So, and I think it's also really healthy for me too, as I age, to kind of always keep track of what the younger generation are doing. And in terms of my kind of continued growth as a player, they're still always, I've been doing this for 20 years now, and they're still always surprising me. So I find that to be really powerful. And having sort of settled here in London now, I really kind of see, it's nice because I teach them, or I work through them through a kind of commissioning project, and then you see them around, and you see them sort of take off and fly and work with other people, and I find that really powerful. Another thing I did a couple of years ago, definitely a pre-pandemic project, is I there was a scientist whose name has just gone flying out of my head, but she I was starting to see her all over the internet because she was writing the Wikipedia articles for women scientists, because the statistics on Wikipedia are terrible. It's something like 20% of the articles about people are about women. And I had seen that she was basically trying to do a new scientist every day to try to add to, and so she was always posting about who she was doing. I'm not sure if she's still doing it now. I think she might have, got busy with life. But so I thought it would be great to do something similar for composers. And so the South Bank Centre here in London agreed to host a kind of Wikipedia Day, which we called Composing Wikipedia. And we had 2 3-hour sessions over the day, where people could come in with their laptops, and I had done a kind of crash course in how to use Wikipedia in the months leading up to it, and was on hand to kind of help people get started. And we'd made beforehand a big list of composers who we thought should be up there, who weren't. And it was really surprising, some of the names, like composers who were very, very famous and doing amazing work, not on Wikipedia at all. And then we had, through the magic of social media, once again, we had a few other people take it up and join us on the same day from different parts of the world. So we had a group in Amsterdam, we had a group in Chicago, and we had a group in, I think we had a group in Australia, but it was sort of hard to keep track of them with the time zone. And so that was really fun. I think, like, one of the great things about playing new music is one does have a kind of international community that one develops. And the internet's obviously so helpful for this. But we have, going to different festivals, if I'm traveling, things, I always know I'm going to see nice people who I know, who I can sort of, talk about projects with, or just drink coffee with.
Great. Sorry. So I want to talk a little bit about the resources that you have created, and I wanted to ask. I think one that really stuck out to me was the multiphonics. What are some of the resources that you're most proud of, and what was the time that it took to build some of these resources? And I guess, how did you learn to make these resources?
How did I learn to make them? It was really like a process of trial and error, I think. And in terms of deciding what I would write. So on my blog, basically every post is sort of seen as a kind of like mini collaboration with an individual composer. So they're usually inspired by some piece I was working on or somebody I was working with. And there are some examples where you can see that really directly, because I've actually asked the composer if I can put in an example from their score. So there'll be a couple of bars of someone's piece in there. So there was, especially once I got into a lot of the multiphonic stuff, there was a really natural process, because it was always kind of, I was working on something anyway, and it just sort of fed into this. And I thought maybe other people would like to know more about this as well. The multiphonic thing for me was really important, and is probably the thing that I'm most proud of, because the books about extended techniques for clarinet that existed beforehand, what you would generally get is you would get a database of multiphonics that would just go kind of like number 1, number 2, and you would get a list of pitches. If you were lucky, you would also get some information about dynamic possibilities. But what I really I didn't think this was necessarily that helpful for composers, because my feeling was that what would happen, and what did happen, is the composer would be like, those pitches look, I'm just going to just chunk that in there. And so it doesn't become a part of their harmonic language, really. And it doesn't become a part of their, it doesn't always suit the color of the moment. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to have the post about multiphonics to really be about, things like color or articulation or certain techniques for multiphonics. So I've got quite a lot of things on, say, multiphonics that are just underblown, or multiphonics that are, the ones that composers always love are these soft dyad multiphonics, which are just two pitches really close to each other. The composers go crazy for those. And I also wanted, a lot of the contemporary repertoire from like the 80s uses spectrum multiphonics, like this one thing, like it's like loud and it goes like, and that's all you get. And so with those ones, I really love them really soft, when you just get these little kind of little harmonics kind of popping out. So I wanted composers to see that there were kind of two rules with multiphonics, I think, is that every fingering on the clarinet can produce a multiphonic, and every fingering on the clarinet can produce multiple multiphonics. So it's not just that you've got this one sound, you've always got these different harmonics that are possible to bring out. And I think that's really useful and powerful for clarinetists as well, because it really develops your embouchure to practice in this way as well, to see it more like this kind of flexible tube that can do all of these amazing things. So I think in short, yes, I think it's multiphonics, definitely.
Yeah, I just want to pop in. I just love that community drove so much of your resources and the collaborations, and it all kind of comes together. So that's a good lesson for all of us to think about as we are experimenting in our own careers.
Yeah, it's funny. Until I was thinking about it over the last couple of days while I knew we were going to do this recording, and I don't really think about it in terms of community that much. You're just kind of out there and you're doing it, and also there's a big part of just trying to kind of make a living, and but it is so fundamental to how my living has been made, I think. So I feel like I'm in the right place right now.
And I love it, because I'm hearing that what your multiphonics project has done is given composers context, and it's given them shimmer to the work that they're creating. It's taken sort of it's brought back, I guess, the musicality and the intimacy and this idea of community back to the forefront of music making. And I love that. And with that in mind, I'm wondering, are there any composers that you're just hungry to work with, that you haven't worked with yet, and you're like, I really would love to just sit down with them and collaborate and build something really audacious and amazing?
Yeah, I have a whole wish list. I have a blacklist too, but never mind. I think one of the ones I'm really looking forward to this year is there's a Canadian composer called Becca Sims who's just moved to Glasgow to teach there, and she's going to write a new piece for me and Ava, and I think she's amazing. I don't really know what her relationship with the clarinet is like yet, so that's always exciting when you hear someone's amazing trombone piece and you think they should write a piece for me. It's not necessarily the most obvious decision to make, but and I think I just, next week, actually, I'm going to Germany to do a project with Ava. We just commissioned 4 young composers to write new pieces for us. The pieces are done, and we're all meeting in Ava's tiny village to work together for a week. And that's, I don't know. There's so many things left to do, I think, which keeps things fresh, doesn't it? When you feel like you still got stuff to do.
I was going to say the work is never ending, ostensibly, but
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love that there's still such an excitement and such a hunger to sort of continue this work. And there's more to discover, and there's more to nurture. There's more, community to build. Is really what I'm hearing. And I'm very passionate about it because I've been recently working with composers myself, and there's so much involved in just that sort of contact and sort of development, and they ask you to do things, and you're pushing yourself to really sort of create this moment in the way that they've envisioned it, and they're trying to communicate that. And so there's really, I don't know, I just find it very, very beautiful. I think Sarah had a question, perhaps.
Yeah. So I think it's something that all aspects of art, any kind of art, especially when we're learning about it, things are kind of put into boxes, and there are pre-established norms that go with it. And contemporary music is no different. There are pre-existing thoughts about it and things like that. What are some things you think that you do that kind of subvert the norms of what is associated with contemporary music?
It's sometimes hard for me to say what the norms are because I'm sort of in it, but I can definitely compare where we are now with my experience when I was a student. And I think, and certainly in terms of what my students' experience is like. So when I was a student, I think there was a real expectation that there were certain pieces that I had to know and I had to study. And at the time, that was almost exclusively white cis men. So Berio, Lachenmann, Sherino, Kagel, Chelsea, Fernie Howe. And they all wrote amazing pieces for the clarinet, and Rise, very good. And people should learn them. I don't think that, but there was this sort of expectation that you should know them, and also a kind of shaming if you didn't, I think. And I find for my students now, they don't necessarily, like, repertoire discovery is a much bigger part of their education, and going out and finding things and immediately moving into asking their friends to write pieces for them and this kind of thing. And I think that's a huge improvement. And if I've been any part of that, then I'm very happy about it. I think in terms of other kind of breaking of, like, as we were talking about the clarinet multiphonics things, like just trying to find to basically use the technology that we have now to help people to write music that's more idiomatic for our instrument, and also to just kind of fall in love with it a little bit, because the clarinet's the best. Yes. And yeah, I don't know, it's hard to say, because I think a lot of that stuff ends up feeling like very subtle in a way. Like, as I was saying before, you're going out, you're just kind of like living your life and trying, moving from project to project, and it can feel in real life a little bit sort of bitty, and you don't necessarily see those things. A couple of years ago, so one of my first big solo gigs was at this festival in Croatia in like 2009, and I was doing a whole bunch of pieces with electronics there, and then 10 years later, I met this young Croatian composer, and she was saying that, she was really on the verge of giving up, because everything that she was studying, she never encountered again anything other than white cis, often dead, like recently dead white cis men. So still like contemporary music, but barely. And she just didn't see how she could be a composer. And then I turned up and did this concert with playing music by women and being a woman myself and playing with electronics and stuff like this. And now she's doing amazingly well. I think she's just won the Siemens Prize. And like, so once I, once I stopped crying as she was telling me this story, you do think like people don't tell you those things very often, but you have to kind of trust that you're making some kind of difference. Otherwise, it's sort of, yeah, I don't know. Blah, blah, blah. Sorry.
No, I love it. I hear Heather, the canon subverter. You're building new canon. You're expanding the canon. You're destroying the canon. And I am here for it. I celebrate that. I think that's brilliant. I think that's brilliant. Do you have?
So I just want to put something out there. Something that I'm trying to do in my own teaching, in my own studio, is to think about not standard repertoire, but standard techniques and skills. That those standard techniques are what you need to know. You need to know how to phrase. You need to know how to play different styles of music. But having standard rep to teach you that is not necessarily required. That there is no standard rep. There's only standard techniques. And I hear that, and I'm so invigorated by you living that. So thank you.
I love that. That's a great concept. I'm going to steal that.
And if we could apply that to orchestral auditions, where we're not auditioning repertoire, but we're auditioning skill sets, and they're very clear what skills we're looking for, that might revolutionize the way we do things in classical music and music in general. So, hey, Sarah, hey, Heather, look at y'all changing the world. So my question then is, first of all, go ahead and explain to us, because you were saying earlier about how to use your resources, how we could really get into them and sort of just break them up and really make them useful to us. And then, is there any advice you have for anyone who might be looking to create resources, to dive into contemporary music, to expand repertoire, all of these things that you do consciously or unconsciously through the work that you do? Is there any advice that you would give to maybe young Heather or future Heather or whomever? I think your wisdom would be so invaluable.
Okay, so I think if you're a young clarinet player, young Heather, and you want to get into contemporary music, listening is the first thing you have to do. You got to find the players that you think are, and they can be like free improvisers, or they can be new music specialists. And you got to listen to their repertoire. And what you need to do is you need to hear things that you've never heard before on a clarinet, and you need to think, okay, that's possible. How do I make that happen? And you can use my blog in the same way. So if you go through the best place to start, if you're new to multiphonics, I've got a couple of posts on easy B-flat clarinet multiphonics. And I made those ones through polling. So I think there were 35 players that tried them all out. Were you one of them, Berginald? I can't remember. No.
I don't think so.
Okay. That might have been before me. Anyway. So that's a really good one, because a lot of those ones are kind of what I would call plug and play multiphonics. You just sort of put the fingering down and you blow, and they're going to work. And then you can kind of expand from there into some of the more complicated ones. And those ones you really need to be able to hear the different pitches in your head before you play. That's really, really important. And so using my blog, you can kind of play the recording and then just sort of trying to imitate what you hear is a nice way to get started. But certainly there were certain players that I loved when I was in my early 20s, and I listened to their recordings and learned to play the repertoire that they played. And that's, getting your hands on that repertoire can be really easy, because composers love to give their scores to players who they think might play their pieces. So oftentimes it's going to be very cheap or very free to get free to get your hands on the scores, because they would love to have, young players playing their work. And I love it when other players play repertoire that was written for me, because that's how stuff becomes repertoire, isn't it? I've got lost and forgotten the rest of the question.
Well, you touched on.
Oh, go ahead.
No, just saying you touched on how to use the resources. Any advice for up and coming? You had the listening to players. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think it's just about like finding the repertoire that you really love and finding other people to play it with. I mean, for me, chamber music is just the best thing ever. And having colleagues that I love to play with is sort of what gets me up in the morning. So find other people who want to play new pieces. If you're studying, make friends with the composers, because they're going to want to write pieces for you. And that's a really good process to go through then, because they will also be listening to the same recording. So they're going to really challenge you to do things that you weren't able to do before. I also really loved playing contemporary music when I was first going, because I had terrible performance anxiety. But playing new music, just the comfort of knowing that nobody else, it wasn't like playing Brahms sonatas. Nobody knows what's going to happen. So I could just sort of like get on with it, and it didn't scare me so much, and just play. And learn to improvise. You've got to learn to improvise. We're asked to do it all the time in contemporary music, and you've got to be just comfortable with making a big bad noise, and being quite free with it. And yeah, that's my advice.
Thank you. One really last small question about, do you have any advice for people who want to begin building community with composers and other clarinetists in any style of music?
That's a really good question. I guess I mean, the answer is sort of the same in a way. It's like find your people, start small, and try to kind of, I think it's not easy to build things when you find people to work with who kind of resonate with you.
Yeah, thank you. That's perfect advice. Find the people that resonate with you. I love that.
Thanks.
So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.